Hello and welcome to our Tongue Fu Book Club. I am Sam Horn and I am so glad that you're joining us. We are going to be focusing on words to lose and words to use that we can put into practice at work, at home, online, and in public. Now, Arthur Rubinstein said, I have found if you love life, life will love you back. I love this program, and to help you love it back, I promise we are not going to waste your valuable time on ivory tower theories that have no relevance to your world. We're going to focus on real life examples and real life tips that you can put to use immediately to prevent conflict and to promote cooperation. Now, first, let me give a quick backstory about what Tongue Fu is. You may be curious. I'll always be grateful to Dr. Ray Oshiro of the University of Hawaii because more than 30 years ago, he asked me to do a program on dealing with difficult people. Now, this was a public workshop, and we had people from healthcare and finance and from tech and from the military and from the government agencies. And at our first break, there was a gentleman in the front row, and he didn't even get up to go get a cup of coffee. He just kind of sat there gazing off into space. Now, I'm curious. So I went over and I said, what are you thinking about? And he said, Sam, I'm a real estate broker. He said, I deal with some very demanding and arrogant people. They seem to think they can treat me any way they want to. I'm tired of it. He said, I took this course because I thought you were going to teach us some zingers to fire back at them and put them in their place. He said, that's not what this is about, is it? And I assured him that this is not about putting people in their place. It's about putting ourselves in their place so that we can respond with compassion instead of contempt. And now he said, Sam, I'm a student of martial arts. I've studied karate and taekwondo and judo. And what you're talking about is like a verbal form of kung fu, isn't it? Eureka, the perfect name, because that's what Tongue Fu is. Now, if you practice any kind of martial arts, you know that martial artists, they don't go out and pick fights. If someone picks a fight with them, they don't fight and flail back. They use their martial arts skills to diffuse that conflict. And that's what we do with Tongue Fu. It is not about fighting back or flailing back. These are communication skills that we wish we had been taught back in school that can help us handle challenging situations with civility, with diplomacy. In fact, it's really about treating people with the respect that we all want, need, and deserve. Now, when my book Tongue Fu came out, which was more than 25 years ago now, I was on a media tour. My publisher, St. Martin's Press, sent me across the country to do radio interviews and workshops. Now I'm on the plane and I need to double check a quote in the book to make sure I have it right for a TV program in the morning. A woman across the aisle from me grabs the book out of my hands. She said, that looks interesting. Tell me what it's about. I said, well, it's how to handle difficult people without becoming one ourselves. And she said, oh, I could have used that book on the plane before this one. She said, I was seated next to the most obnoxious man. I would have used your book. I would hit him with it. That is not what Tongue Fu is about. It is not when someone says something unfair, unkind, inappropriate. It is not about hitting back or getting mad or getting even. It is not about giving people a piece of our mind. It is about giving ourselves peace of mind because we finally know what we can say in sensitive and stressful and challenging situations that will help instead of hurt. If that sounds good to you, you're in the right place. Now, here's our format that you can trust us to do every single time we meet. I'm going to start with the topic of the day, and our topic today is words to lose and use in stressful situations. Our quote from today comes from William Safire, the famous linguist. And he said in an interview, the reporter said, do you think that sloppy communication is due to ignorance or apathy? And with a twinkle in his eye, William Sapphire said, I don't know, and I don't care. I think we care about how we communicate. We may not know that there are these things called fighting words. And fighting words actually create conflict. They create resentment. They create resistance. If we replace them with different words, we can actually create rapport and respect instead of resistance and resentment. So how this works is that after our quote of the day, then I go into success stories of the day and I show the shift. I use a real life example that shows what happens when we use one of these words to lose, and then shows what can happen if we use the words to use. So if we have the shift, we can turn conflict into cooperation. Then we introduce our guest expert, and boy, we've got a great one today. I'll tell you more about Laurie Bachmann in a few minutes when we bring her up after our success story. Then we usually share one more word once again with a show the shift example so that you can relate to it and think about how you can put this into practice in your personal and professional life. Then we have a question from you. Please put some in chat and I'll get to as many as I can in our live sessions. And then we do a preview of the next day. So that's our format. Now, one more thing. If you've been in my previous book clubs, this So You Want to Write a Book club, or the Someday is Not a Day in the Week book club, you know that I believe in taking notes. In fact, as 17-time MC and executive director of the Maui Writers Conference, all of our authors didn't agree on anything except this: ink it when you think it. So please have paper and pen ready, because many people tell me that they take notes on our ideas. They post them on the refrigerator to keep them in sight, in mind. So next time one of their kids says is that, what do you mean we're not going back to school? Or the spouse says is like, it's your turn to put gas in the car. We have a response that is going to help in that situation instead of hurt. So please take notes, put a vertical line down the center. Now I'm going to tell a quick little story. Listen for the word that is doing all the damage. Years ago, I'm renting a car and a woman comes up next to me and she says to the employee, I've reserved a Ford Mustang and my name is let's call her Mrs. Robinson. And the employee looked up her record and said, oh, yes, Mrs. Robinson, we have your reservation right here, but we don't have any Ford Mustangs left. She said, how can that be? I called weeks ago to reserve that kind of car. He said, well, I see that you did, but we rented them all out this morning. She said, I don't understand. I took the time to call. You said you'd save one. He says, well, I know, but we have a new employee this morning, and back and forth they went. In fact, when I left, they were still arguing. And it was because the employee kept using this verbal eraser word. This verbal eraser word cancels out what goes before it. It creates an either or, right, wrong argument. Now, I bet you know what that word is, right? It's the word but. Please write down on the left of your column, but. Because listen to the impact of it. Well, I hear what you're saying, but you did a good job on that, but. Well, I'm sorry that happened, but. I understand it's important to you, but. Yes, we said we'd start at 9 o'clock, but. Do you hear, as soon as you hear that word but, you realize they're not really sorry. We're not starting at 9 o'clock. They don't hear what we say. Is that the word but once again makes it an either or conversation. So let's move over to the right. What can we replace that argumentative word but with? Please put down the little 3-letter word and. Now listen to the difference. If that employee had said, you're right, Mrs. Robinson, you did reserve a Ford Mustang, and I apologize, we rented them out this morning, and we're going to upgrade you to another. Do you see how the word and would have acknowledged instead of argued? I'm going to say this again. it would have acknowledged instead of argued. In fact, underneath the word but, you may want to put argue, because when you hear people arguing, chances are both people are using the word but. It's like, well, I read that yesterday, but it's like, well, we agreed to do that, but it's like, well, I know that the price was supposed to be, but as long as we use that word, but we will be in an argument. Over on the right, it's like, I'm sorry that happened. And let's see how we can prevent that from happening again, or how we can fix that. Instead of, yeah, I know we were supposed to start at 9 o'clock, but we're waiting for latecomers. You're right. We were supposed to start at 9 o'clock. We're going to wait 2 more minutes, and then we're going to start. And thank you for being here on time. Instead of, I hear what you're saying, but it's not my fault. I hear what you're saying, and Tara is in charge of that. Let's go ahead and put you in touch with Tara so the two of you can figure out how you're going to move that forward. The word and advances the conversation. The word but anchors it in an argument. I'll always remember in one of my workshops, and I have had the privilege of speaking on Tung Fu at the Asian Leadership Conference with the president of South Korea and with Jack Ma of Alibaba. I've had the privilege of giving workshops for Boeing and Intel and Cisco and Capital One and Nationwide and on and on. And in one of the workshops, this was for a school district, and one of the teachers put her hand up and she said, I have been teaching English for 25 years. She said, I've been listening to this word and I've been trying to think of an exception to it. However, every time I come up with an example, I realize that this is true. She said, well, you would have gotten an A on your test, but you didn't see the 3 problems on the back of the page. I know you were looking forward to the bus trip, but the prices went up. We can't afford it anymore. Once again, do you hear how the word but is like a verbal door slamming in people's faces? Look at the difference. You would have gotten an A on your test and you missed the 3 problems on the back of the page. From now on, please look at the front and the back of the paper, because often we have questions on the back as well. Now we're being a coach instead of a critic. Instead of, I know you were looking forward to the bus trip, but we can't afford it anymore. I know you were looking forward to the bus trip and the prices went up. And if we have a fundraiser and can raise an extra $300, we can still go on that. Do you see once again how the word and is proactive? It often moves people to what can be done about a situation instead of just slamming the door on it and telling them it's not going to happen. Now, that woman who is an English teacher, she was a teacher at heart. Do you know what she did? She put a jar on her desk in front of the classroom, and she promised her class that if they could catch her saying the word but every single time, she would put a nickel in that jar. And she said, Sam, the first week, there were a lot of nickels going in that jar because I use it automatically. I don't even think about it. And she is right. Many of us don't think about it. And we can ask people around us to catch us using the word but. Because guess what? If they catch us using the word but, they're going to become more aware of it. They're going to start catching themselves using the word but. Everyone around us at work, at home, is going to start using more ands instead of buts. And believe me, it makes for a much more cooperative home place and workplace. And now I get to introduce our guest. Laurie Bachmann is not only the founder and the CEO of the Mentor Shift Group, she is the author of the book Mentor Shift, and she was one of the top executives at Lockheed in the M&A department, mergers and acquisitions, where she handled millions of dollars of contracts in the space industry, and she is a certified Tung Fu trainer. I'm so glad that Laurie is joining us, and I can't wait to hear your story and insights. Laurie, welcome. And Laurie, if you'll take yourself off mute, please.
That's got to be better.
Hey, there you go. Mo better.
Okay, it's more better. Okay, hello, good morning. The power of one word. From knowing Sam, taking the Tongue Fu course, being certified, I've learned so deeply in my own life about the power of just one word. And excuse me, it's great news because as we all go through this with her in the next few weeks, we're going to see how one word can shape our lives, our conversations, and the emotions in our conversations. So here's a couple of examples of the power of one word. Now, I'm not talking about grammar, because that would be like when I was growing up, my grandma used to practically live with us, and I would answer the phone as a teenager, and I would say, someone on the other end would say, "It's Laurie there?" And I'd say, "This is her." And my grandma would yell out in the background, "This is she, this is she." And I said, okay. So I'm not talking about that. That's grammar. What I'm talking about is just a single word that can change the emotions. So a couple of examples in the Bible, there's a really neat analogy of that our mouths, our tongues, everybody stick out your tongue. No, our mouths and our tongues are like something that we can control. And it compares in this one description of our tongue and our words are like the rudder of a ship. And although the seas are stormy and the ship is big, we still can, through the use of this little rudder, direct the way that the ship goes. And I thought that was a neat example. And, I don't know about you all, but you've probably felt, as I have, boy, what can I control in where we are in the world today? But this tongue, this little rudder, and the things I say, that's something that I can be in charge of and influence. I like the Mark Twain quote that he said, make sure I say it right. "The difference between the almost right word and the right word is really a large matter. It's the difference between lightning bug and lightning." So that little word bug, I got zapped by a lightning bug versus I got zapped by lightning. Big difference. So just to give a couple of examples from my life and in the teaching that I've done of how great Tongue Fu has been. And we're going off but and, right, Sam? I had to step out a minute.
That's right. I want to hear that mountain story with the girls,
okay.
Laurie.
Did we cover should?
Just go right into your mountain story with the girls.
Okay. So just an example with but and then my mountain story. But and I have a teenage son. I don't know if any of you have raised 16-year-old boys, but it's kind of easy to do the but a lot. And my son was kind of school classes. Am I supposed to go to classes? So he would show up and he would have like a 90 in his English test and a 65 in his math test. And I would find myself saying, Andrew, you did a good job on that English test, but get on it with the math test, would you? And so everything I said, but was breaking and like Sam said, would advance. So I've been trying to discipline myself with him to say, hey, but cancels and say and instead. So dealing with my teenager, I could shut the door on our conversation or I could open it up. And I could share a million examples of those. What Sam's referring to is a group of us ladies went up into the mountains. We were going to have a little ladies retreat, and there were 6 of us, and each one of us was supposed to bring something that kind of represented us or what we were excited about at the time or whatever. So one girl brought yoga poses, so we all have to get in the yoga pose. Another one bought how to make jewelry bookmarks, with little beads and that kind of thing. Another talked about her daughter's anxiety and how to get through that. One girl was a falconer. So you know how you put the falcon or the eagle on your arm and it flies in, and she taught us all about falconry. Well, guess what I taught? This little words to lose and words to use. And it was so great. Like all the audiences that I speak to, those girls were at rapt attention the whole time. And so they just listened. Each one of them, we'll go through them in the next few weeks. The only thing about it was then throughout the rest of the weekend, as we talked with one another, we go, oh, but or and, should, oh, next time. So but it was all in good fun. So I've just had the pleasure of I'm kind of an ambassador for Tongue Fu since I've been certified, and since I've seen what it does in the life of my relationships. one more example, and I'll hand it back to Sam. Was
And-
again with my son Andrew.
And we've got about 1 more minute to wrap it up. Thank you, Laura.
He got his driver's license, 16 years old, in a 45-mile-an-hour per speed limit. Well, let's just say he had gone a little over and ended up with having to pay $50 in court. And so when he came in, everything in me wanted to say, you know, you should know better. You shouldn't do that, Andrew. Instead, have gathered the peace of mind to guide that little rudder in that ship to say, you know, hey, bud, next time, what do you want to do different with your driving? So anyway, can't express enough how much in work and at home it's changed the nature and the course of our relationships. That's it, Sam.
Thank you so much, Laurie. I remember when we talked about this, you said that here are teenage girls who have adults telling them what to do all the time at home, in their classroom, their coaches, etc. And yet in the weeks following that, they kept talking about how they used this, how they actually caught themselves saying but and used it, and their friends were talking about it, and the people were talking about it on their sports teams. And what I loved about that is that whether it's a CEO or whether it is a lawyer or whether it is a teacher or whether it is a teenager, these words really make a difference, don't they?
They make so much difference. Here you go, ladies. Everyone should have one of these. You will by the end, I bet.
We'll be talking about that, Laurie. Thanks so much, Laurie. We'll be putting your information up on our private Facebook group here so that people can find out more about the work that you do. And I'm so glad that Laurie segued right into our next word. On your notes, please put on the left word should. And now listen to the story and once again, hear the damage that one little word can do. When I lived in Hawaii, I had a good friend who was a football coach on the Big Island. Now, his team was tied with another team for the island championship. And this was the final game of their season, and they're playing the team they're tied with. Whoever wins this game gets to go to Oahu for the state finals. It's a very dramatic situation. It's the fourth quarter. The score is tied. They've got the ball. They're marching down the field. Their quarterback throws a perfect pass, and their best receiver, who is his son, is racing down the sidelines. Here comes the ball. And he does something he's been told 100 times never to do. What's that? He looks back. He can't resist seeing how much he beat the defender. And when he looks back, you know what happens. The ball goes right through his hands on the ground. He is dejected. He walks back to the bench. My friend, the coach, is so caught up in the emotion of the game that without really thinking what he's going to say, he starts yelling at his son, "Johnny, you should have kept your eyes on that ball." He said, "My gosh, it was a touchdown pass. You had the game in your hands and you blew it." And he didn't stop. And finally, his son couldn't take it anymore. And he stood up and he said, "Dad, it was a mistake." He said, "I didn't mean to do it. I never want to play for you again." And after the game, his son got a ride home with someone else. And when he got home, he went right upstairs and he'd even talked to his father. And my friend called me the next day. He told me what happened. He said, "Sam, I know what I said just made things worse. What are you supposed to say when people make stupid mistakes?" I said, "Charlie, do you know anyone who can undo the past? Because when someone makes a mistake and we tell them what they should have done, they will resent us even if we're right. In fact, they'll resent us especially if we're right. Why? It's because they're losing face and they can't undo it." Over on the left, please put that word should. Because the word should or you shouldn't have often refers to the past. People can't undo the past. We are coming across as a critic, and people are losing face over that mistake, and they will resent us even if we're right. Over on the right, please put the words next time or from now on or in the future. Because when we say next time, keep your eyes on the ball no matter what. In the future, do this. From now on, try this. Now we are being a coach instead of a critic. Now people are learning from mistakes instead of losing face over mistakes. Now we are shaping behavior and performance instead of shaming behavior and performance. It is the difference between a mistake being a failure, and often people will retreat and withdraw, or a mistake being a lesson and they will move better for it. My dad, Warren Reed, was involved with the Future Farmers of America. He was head of vocational ag education for the state of California. And you know what he used to tell me? You can't motivate people to do better by making them feel bad. I'm going to say it again. We can't motivate people to do better by making them feel bad. And that word should makes people feel bad, and it doesn't teach them how to do it better. So now, even if it's ourselves, if we make a mistake, oh, I should have known better. I should have been more careful. I should have listened. If we're telling it to an employee, it's like, you should have brought that up at a staff meeting. Well, you should have gotten approval before you went ahead with that. Well, you should have listened when we. Do you see how that word should, once again, when we're shoulding on people, we're making them feel bad. We're not teaching them how to do it better. I think we have time for one more success story, and then we'll ask a question and give a preview of it. I had the privilege of working with Rod Laver in the tennis industry on Hilton Head Island. Rod Laver won the Grand Slam of tennis twice. This is the Australian Open, French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open, all 4 tournaments in the same year, and he did it twice. Now, I had an opportunity. I was not a tennis pro. I ran the tennis pro shop and ran our programs, was in charge of membership, etc. However, one day, Rocket and I were hitting. Now, we had a mock game, and it's my ad, which means if I win one more point, I am going to take a game off Rocket. Now, he was giving this to me. Please understand, Rocket is light years better than I am. However, he was throwing the dog a bone. So here I am, my ad, and he pulled me over this side, and I run over the left, and I'm running over to the right, and he's yanking me back. He's bringing me up short. And finally, he kind of throws up a weak lob. Now, I come up. If I put this overhead away, I am going to take a point. I'm going to take a game off Rocket. Well, in my eagerness, I commit the cardinal sin of overheads. Tweet Coleman is on the line. She's a USTA teaching pro. She knows what I did. I pulled my head down. I looked where I was going to put the ball instead of keeping my eyes up on the ball. I didn't hit the ball. I missed the ball. And I erupted. It's like, I should have known better. I should have kept my head up. It's like, how many times do I have? Now, Rocket was known for his sportsmanship, and he just waited for me to calm down for a moment. And then he went like this. And I walked over to the net, and he said, Sam, champions never use the word should. They always use the word next time. And if you look at champion athletes, if you look at top leaders, if you look at people who are peak performers, you will see the truth of that. It is a waste of time to tell ourselves what we should have done. Instead, we immediately think, instead of focusing on what I did wrong last time, how can I do it right next time? The power of changing the word should to next time, from now on in the future, so that we are a coach instead of a critic. And now, by the way, our question of today is that someone on LinkedIn, I'd post an article about this, and they wrote back and they said, is however an okay replacement for but? And I said, however is a fancy but. Now just listen to it. It's like, well, I'd like to help you. However, it's like, yeah, that was the price of it. However, do you hear? Once again, however, erases what went before it. Focus only on what goes after it. It's a very adversarial word. So what are we going to talk about in round 2 in our next session? We're going to talk about more words to lose and use when we have to give bad news. As Laurie had referenced, we're in the middle of COVID right now, and some of us are having to lay people off. Some of us are having to close our doors. Some of us are having to cancel events. And when we have to give bad news, what can we say in a way that makes it better instead of just shrugging our shoulders and saying, not my fault, nothing I can do, no way I can change it? I have thoroughly enjoyed being here on our day one of our Tongue Fu Book Club. Please share this with others. It's free, it's virtual. We will archive these live videos on our site so you can watch them whenever you want, as often as you want. I'm Sam Horn. Look forward to seeing you next time.